Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today I'm going to be doing my top 10 most rewatchable horror movies. Now don't get me wrong, this is not the best 10 horror movies I've seen. These are just ones that I can throw on anytime and just have a lot of fun with. Like Hereditary is in my top 20 horror movies. It was not one I'm going to throw on all the time. So there's a difference between best and favourite. I think a lot of people do agree with that. Now these are movies that I've probably watched from a young age, that I just throw on I used to throw on all the time. I wore the VHS tapes out and stuff, and there are still movies here that I still watch to this day. I mean, I'll always have a love for these movies. So that is basically the criteria for this video. So let's just get into it now. Number 10. Number 10 is going to be Scream. Now, I remember my mum not really wanting me to watch this when it first came out because the opening scene was so damn brutal. But I think she gave in after a couple of months, and yes, she was right. What an opening scene to a horror movie where Drew Barrymore is just absolutely butchered and hung from a tree. But what I gotta say about Scream, man, I mean, everyone seems to love this movie. It is still the best in a very strong, consistent franchise, which this movie spawned, which is still going today. Or we'll see. There's a little bit of trouble here and there with Spyglass and stuff, but that's another story. But what I loved about this is how Wes Craven basically reinvented the slasher genre. It was at a bit of a bad time for slashers. I mean, people were sort of getting bored with it after having hundreds, even thousands in the 80s, and in the early 90s, people just started to care less. And Wes Craven sort of tested the water a little bit with Wes Craven's New Nightmare, where he was kind of parodying, or, sort of trying to make this story happen within the Elm Street franchise. And I think it did work, but not a lot of people caught on to that. It was Scream where that really happened. And basically this movie uses the rules of horror movies, how you can't have sex or you'll die, or never say you'll be back because you won't be back, stuff like that. And it uses all of that and puts it right into this movie for such a fun time. But it is also a very clever slasher movie as well. I gotta say, this is just one that on rewatch, you basically notice how psychotic the killers are in this movie. Like, I never guessed what was going to happen by the end of the film the first time I watched it. But the second time you watch it, you're like, holy shit, how didn't I see that one coming? Because these characters are talking by the fountain at one point, and they're talking about how to gut people and stuff like that. And you're like, oh my God, it was right in front of my face. So I think it's clever like that. And you got Neve Campbell, who was a born Scream queen in here. So many great characters. Courtney Cox, as Gale Weathers. You got Dewey in there, played by David Arquette. Horror characters here that will go on to be in horror folklore. And this is just one of them endings that really threw me off, and I was thinking, wow, I didn't think this movie could get any more clever, but it did. I think a lot of people were threw off by this because I think it was probably the first time that they'd done this with having two killers instead of one. And it's got the best character in the entire Scream franchise, of course, Stu Macher. What a character he is.
Okay, whatever.
Yeah? Nice. Cool, you guys bring food, all right?
But yeah, this basically picks slashers back up and put horror in a very good place again. So that is Scream. Number 9 is going to be The Craft. Now, this is just a film me and my sister threw on constantly on VHS as kids, and I still throw it on here and there to this day. Now, this follows this young teenage girl who moves to this new town and meets these new friends at a high school, and they are sort of trying out witchcraft and stuff. Now, I just think a lot of these movies from the 90s worked in the high school setting. Halloween H2O, The Faculty, Scream, which I just spoke about. It just worked for that time period, didn't it? But she meets these young girls, and they're kind of outcast at school. They're kind of weird. They're kind of gothic-looking characters. And people don't really associate with them. But this young girl, Sarah her name is, gets in with them. And they start to practice witchcraft and they start to learn all these spells and stuff like that. And it's all fun for a while, but then it starts to go down a very dark path. Nancy, the main character, who is really focused on this, she sort of takes it to extremes at times, and people even start dying in this movie. But what I like about this film is each of these four girls have got like a story going for them. Like there's this one girl who is really struggling at school because she's got to deal with these racist bullies, and you got this other girl who's got all these burns on her back and she's trying to overcome that because she's not confident. And then you got Farouza Balk's character who is fixated on becoming powerful, a powerful witch and stuff, but she's got a really horrible background at home because her mother and father are always arguing and are very abusive. And you got the new girl, Sarah, who is just trying to fit in really and make these new friends. And what I like about this movie as well, with all them story paths, they kind of use spells on people and stuff at the school to try and, you know, make their lives a little bit better and stuff like that. So that's all fun. So yeah, I just think The Craft is a really good time, one that is paced very well and just absolutely flies by, and you just have a lot of fun with it. So The Craft is number 9. Number 8 is going to be Friday the 13th. Now, this is one of the very first horror movies I ever watched, and it absolutely terrified the life out of me. I had this neighbour next door called Vicky, and she had a bunch of horror movies, and I told her that I'd went to my friend Jamie's house and watched snippets of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And she went, oh, I've got a few horror films there. What about this one, Friday the 13th? And I remember we sat in her house and watched it. We were really good friends at the time. And I was just terrified. I really did not like the music, you know, the cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. And the fact that you couldn't see this killer, and I was just like, oh my God, it's like the way the axes were thrown at people's heads, where Kevin Bacon gets this thing shoved through his throat there, like this spear. I was like, it was so hard to take in. I'd never seen anything like that before, really, apart from Elm Street 2, and that was terrifying enough. But I look back on this movie now and go, was I really scared of this? It's just so funny how ridiculous this movie is. But every time Friday the 13th comes up, I kind of just want to throw it on. It's got a very classic horror movie vibe for it. Like, it is a classic horror movie. It just works. It's got that 80s feel. It's very, very cheesy. And it's not a particularly good film, but it's one that just works for me. Like, there are scenes where people are just walking around talking about shit and making coffee and stuff, and it's like, what's this got to do with the story? But there's a charm to it. Like Ralph, who's always warning these characters about going to this camp because it's doomed. I love his character. Like, he's one of the worst actors you've ever seen, but it just works because he puts his heart and soul into delivering them lines. And it's basically, I think you all know the story. It's basically about this boy who drowned, and there's been a curse put on the camp, and these killings start to happen. That's basically it. It's just a typical slasher movie with a really cool ending. No, I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen Friday the 13th, but it's 43 years later now, 44 years, so maybe you should have watched it, but the reveal and stuff was really fun, I thought. So Friday the 13th is one that I can basically just throw on anytime, but especially on Friday the 13th. Next up, we probably have the most simple movie on this list, and that is Halloween. Another one that you can just watch every year in October. But to be honest, I could just throw this on anytime and have a great time with it. This is one that improves on rewatch for me. Every time I watch it, I just see new things here and there. This is basically about a young boy who kills his sister at 6 years old and then goes on 15 years later, is it? And he breaks out of this mental asylum, comes back to Haddonfield and starts slaying babysitters and stuff. Michael Myers, come on, you've all seen this movie. John Carpenter, man, he just takes this very simple concept and makes it work. One of the very first slashers out there, and I think people were just starting to really feel something with this movie, and that's why the slasher craze sort of blew up. I know Black Christmas probably there first, but I think this is the one where people went, yeah, this is for me, basically, and it spawned like 13 sequels or something now. Michael Myers, man, he's just one of the greatest horror movie villains ever, isn't he? I mean, he's just that white mask of his, and he's just marching around, you know, popping out from bushes here and there. But there's so many simple things in this movie that just work for me. Like, there's one point where Michael Myers drives past Laurie Strode, and I think he's just going past, and then he turns his head a little bit, and Laurie Strode really feels like someone's watching it. I think things like that just work. The music by Carpenter, the score is one of the best movie scores ever, and I like the way he integrates it in all the right moments in this movie. It's so well edited and put together. I just don't know how something this simple can be one of the greatest movies ever made, but it just works. Everything about it is spot on. So Halloween has got to be in this list. Next up is going to be a movie slash miniseries. Now, this is a miniseries. It's a two-parter, and I missed it when it was on TV. I wasn't old enough, and I only ever got the VHS. And that is Stephen King's It. So I know it's a miniseries. I just like to see it as a fully fledged movie. That's the way I see it. Doesn't matter, basically. But this is one that it was always the cover that really wanted to make me watch this. This big white clown on the front with this red hair and stuff. I was like, holy shit, I gotta see that.
Take your pick, Billy boy.
And this follows a group of kids who are terrorized by this Pennywise in the town of Maine, or Derry, Maine, should I say. And they sort of all come together to try and put a stop to this clown and kill it, basically. But every 27 years, this clown, or this thing that takes the form of a clown, resurfaces and starts to kill kids in the town again. And they come back 27 years later as adults to try and kill this thing once and for all. Now, what I love about this is it goes through each one of the characters in the first part of the film or series and shows you their experiences with this clown and so on and so forth. Each one of them tells this whole little mini story, and that just totally works for me. And the second part is one that gets a lot of flack, but I think it actually is really good, and it's got some of the more creepier moments in there, like where Audrey pulls up and Pennywise is there. He's going, "Don't you want it? Don't you want it?" I always get creeped out by that part. But yeah, it's one of them that really is slow paced, but just works and doesn't feel that slow, basically. Like I said, it's probably the longest one on this list, but it's one that I just used to wear the VHS tape out of. It's a movie slash series that I can just go back to now. I could go and watch it now, even though it's 3 hours. It just works for me. Tim Curry is amazing as Pennywise. It's awesome. My favourite Stephen King adaptation. Not his best, but my personal favourite. So that is It. Next up, we have a more family-focused horror movie, but one that I adore to bits, and that is The Witches. Now, I gotta say, there are some very dark moments in this. It's probably the scariest kids movie ever made, in my opinion. But this is basically Luke, who goes and stays at this hotel with his grandma, and his grandma has told him of these witches before, and he finds out that these whole band of witches are staying in the hotel, and they're having this big witch meeting, and their meeting is going to consist of them coming up with plans to wipe England rid of children, basically, because they hate children, they smell bad to them, and they just don't want any children around them whatsoever. But man, this movie starts with a really dark tone. Like, there's a kid living in this village, and this witch is eyeing her up for months beforehand because she wants to kill her, and she's watching her out the house with her purple eyes and stuff, and then she finally kidnaps her in an alley and pulls her to one side, and the young girl is never seen again. That part of the movie always scares me. It still scares me to this day a little bit. I just think that's such a sinister thing to put in a kid's movie, but man, it works. It's got a very dark edge there. And we got Angelica Houston, who is awesome as the Grand High Witch in this movie. I love it when she takes the makeup off and stuff, and it's just revealed that she's this really grotesque Grand High Witch. And the fact that the witches are all sitting in there, and the auditorium is just a really fun part of the movie, and it's up to Luke and his friend Bruno, who are turned into mice in this movie, to work with the grandma and take these witches down. Just a really, really fun film. Really funny dialogue in this movie as well. Bruno Jenkins really does crack me up. All he cares about is food, man. Yeah, one of them I just had to put in there. Me and my sister love this movie. So that is The Witches. Next up, we have The Lost Boys, and this has got to be the most 80s movie on this list. This basically has everything you want in an 80s horror movie. You got the mohawks there, the music, it's got everything. And this is Joel Schumacher's best movie, easily, in my opinion. And this follows Sam and Michael, who moved to this new town with their mum and go and stay with their grandpa. It's called Santa Carla, I believe, and it's the murder capital of the world. And the reason for that is because David and his little gang of vampires are going around just basically killing people. Michael sort of runs into David and starts to become a vampire and become part of his gang, really.
Drink some of this, Michael. Be one of us.
But this movie has got so many fun, wacky, zany characters, like the Frog Brothers, who are warning Sam about these vampires that inhabit Santa Carla. You got the grandpa, who's just the weirdest guy you've ever met, but he's so funny. And this movie all just comes together with Sam trying to save Michael, his brother, from becoming a fully fledged vampire by killing the head vampire, basically. So it's probably my favourite vampire movie ever, really. I just think it's awesome. I love this movie to bits. It's one of them that you can just sit down, throw on, and it's just so easy to get through. It's just such a fun movie. And some of the music in this movie, man, it's got one of the best soundtracks ever. I love that Tim Capello, I Still Believe. I still believe. My God, I used to play that song constantly, and Lost in the Shadows and stuff. It's an awesome movie, man. I love it. So that is The Lost Boys. Next up, we have, in my opinion, the greatest horror movie of all time, but I put a third on this list because the other two ahead of it, I do watch more. But that is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, this is a movie, when I first watched it, I wasn't fully fussed on. I thought, it was okay. I was expecting a little bit more with the title and with it being banned for so long here in the UK. The more I watch it, the more I just think, wow, this is damn near perfect. Tobe Hooper's masterpiece, in my opinion. And this basically follows a group of 5 friends who are going to see the old house that they used to live in. And one of them goes off track and goes and visits this house because I think they need gas or something like that. And Leatherface and his family of goons live there, basically. Now, this movie is just so well shot. That's one of the things I notice more the more I watch it, is the cinematography in this movie. The lovely shots that Tobe Hooper captures. Like, there's one where they just get out the van, but the camera is so far back and the van looks miniature. Things like that just work for me. Obviously, you got the one where is it Pam? She's walking into the house and the camera kind of zooms behind her and stuff. That's a lovely shot, not because of her ass, but it's just a lovely shot the way it works, where she gets off the swing and stuff. And there's so many great moments in this film where you first see Leatherface come behind that door and just hit Kirk on the head with the hammer, and then you've got where in my opinion, one of the greatest horror movie moments ever made, where Pam runs out the house and Leatherface she's out in the bright sun, and then Leatherface just pulls her back into the darkness there. You know, it's one of them films that is just so realistic. It feels like this movie could be true, and that is, for me, is what is best about scary movies. When it feels like it could be true, it's not some entity or ghost, it's real people. That is what scares me the most about this film. And the third act is one I used to think trailed off a little bit, but man, it's one of my favourite parts of the movie now, especially the dinner scene where they're all just acting like real psychopaths, because they are, and Sally's screaming her ass off. I mean, that is a great performance. I know she done like a nearly 24-hour shoot for this, so she really is feeling that pain there, basically, behind her eyes and stuff. It's a fantastic film. I love it to death. I had to put it in this list. That is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Also, I did go to cinema to watch this last year on the big screen, and it was fantastic. So yeah, that is in third place. Next up, we have Child's Play 2. Now, Chucky has become one of the biggest horror icons, hasn't he? But I gotta say, this is where he is at his full best. I feel like they had a great character in the first one, but on this one, they just had total fun with him. And he is basically brought back by the toy company, and he hunts down Andy to take over his body once again. And this is just got so many great kills, so many great one-liners. Everything just works for me in this movie. It really does. Chucky looks awesome. The animatronics on him are fantastic. I love how much of a badass third act this is, where he's kind of got the knife shoved into his arm there, and he's just chasing Andy through this toy factory.
I hate kids.
This is a film that I used to rent constantly from the video store. Like every other week, I'd rent this, and my dad would go, "Really? You want Child's Play 2 again?" But I was just fascinated by this film. It's only like an 80-minute movie. It absolutely flies by. It's just such a fun film. I love moments where Phil, the adopted father, the guy who adopts Andy, he's basically telling Andy that he's crazy and he's imagining things. And then when Chucky finally has him pulled up by the leg and he's going to break his neck, he just looks at him and says, "How's it hanging, Phil?" Phil just can't believe what he's seeing. Things like that just make this movie so great. It's just a fun film. I really love Miss Cattlewell, one of the least likable characters in any movie I've ever seen, gets her comeuppance when Chucky beats the shit out of her with that cane. Chucky is fantastic in this film. This is why he's one of my favourite horror icons. He's great in all of them, but mainly Child's Play 2. Such a fun slasher. That is Child's Play 2. In first place, though, is going to be A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. Now, you might have heard me before saying I watched little snippets of an Elm Street 2 at my friend Jamie's house, but it was really the first time I watched a horror movie in full was A Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Like, even Friday the 13th, when I went to my friend Vicky's house, I could only watch it in snippets here and there. I mean, I did watch the full movie, but like, I'd watch one half and then have to turn it off and go back the next day and then kind of watch the rest. And this is one I just remember sitting through, fully focused, and watched it all the way through. And to this day, it's one of my favourite horror movies of all time. I think it's one of the best horror movies of all time. I think it's one of the best sequels of all time. And I think it's the best movie in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, personally. And this basically is all moved to a mental hospital. And it follows these characters who are all having the same dream. And that is a really good concept for a Freddy movie, because no one kind of believed them, but Nancy comes in from the first movie and sort of hears what they're saying and works with them to defeat Freddy in their dreams. And what I like about this is each of these characters can be what they want in their dreams. Like, there's this one girl, Taryn, who wants to be a badass, and she's got these knives and all this mohawk and stuff when she's in her dreams. And you got this other guy, Kincaid, who's super strong in his dreams, and they use these kind of powers to take Freddy on in the dreams, and that all just totally works for me. They are great characters as well. They're very likable characters, all of them, and they're fun people to be around, basically. But I like how Nancy sort of comes into this as this legacy character, if you like. I mean, she's only in one movie in there, but she sort of takes the mantle, she takes charge in this movie, really, and leads the characters into their dreams to defeat Freddy. Freddy is awesome in this. They've got the fine balance between comedic and scary. Like, he's terrifying in part 2, but here he's throwing in some one-liners here and there, but they're not over the top funny. They're dark humor. They're nasty jokes, what he's playing, really, on these kids.
Let's get high.
And what he's saying to them, Robert Englund's puts an awesome performance in here. I just think this is the most fun. It's got the most creative kills. Like, the guy, Joey, not Joey, it's not Joey, but I forgot his name. Philip. He's sort of wants to be a puppeteer, and his death is with the veins come out of his arms, and he's walking along, and Freddy slices them, and he falls off the building. Then you got Jennifer, whose head is shoved into the TV because she wants to be a movie star, and he's like, here's your prime time, bitch, and throws her head through the TV. Things like that just make this movie so awesome. Lovely practical effects. There's a snake scene in this where Freddy is like this big gigantic snake, and it looks way better than it does in Freddy vs. Jason, because that just is a CGI mess. So top props, the top thumbs up for the prop team and the special effects team who made this movie happen. So for me, I love this film. I could just watch it anytime. It's fantastic. So that is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors, in number 1. Okay guys, hope you all enjoyed this video. What do you think of these movies, my favourite movies? What are your favourite top 10? Leave them down below and we'll get a bit of discussion going. I would love to hear your opinions. But thanks so much everyone. If you horror is your sort of thing, please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel. It would really help me out. Thanks so much. You take care and I'll see you on the next video.